All right. So my name is Beth Robinette, and I am the fourth generation of my family. Oh my God, I didn't realize the sound was going to happen. Can you hear that? Oh, it's a little breath of summer right there. So this right here, what's happening is most of my job. It's pretty great. Me sitting here looking at her chewing cud, looking at me. So I run the Lazy R Ranch with my dad just west of Spokane, Washington. I'm the fourth generation of my family. A couple of you guys were in the earlier session, and there's going to be some repeat slides because I did Dad's presentation for him. Don't tell. But I really want to talk to you guys a little bit about the ranch and our background, and also some of the other projects that I've been working on, because I'm also a serial committer, I guess. But when I think about how I've interacted with change in our food system, the first thing that came up for me was my family's background, the Lazy R, which, if I was going to summarize the change that we made, we changed how we moved the cows around and stuff, but we really changed the why of what we were doing. We changed the paradigm from a conventional system that was basically doing what Extension told us to do, and we were making less and less money every year, but we were just sort of locked in the system because that's what you're supposed to do. And we changed this paradigm to, what if we were running our operation to meet our quality of life needs? What if that was the goal of our business? And that's really the change that we've made. I can talk to you all day about how to run cows on grass, and I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit right now. But I would say that's the really foundational change that we made. So I want to give a little shout out to these beautiful human beings in this picture. These are the people that taught me holistic management, and that's the Roots of Resilience crew. So this is a group of people who my dad was trained with in the mid-'90s. He had an opportunity to become part of this grant through the Kellogg Foundation to be trained in holistic management. And there was a group of folks that went through that training with him that have sat on a Tuesday morning conference call every Tuesday for the last 20 years just talking about holistic management. And now I'm like the groupie token young person of that group of humans, and I just get to absorb all of the information from them. So what is holistic management? We're going to boil it down to four things, four key insights. The first is that nature functions in wholes. This picture was taken in my front yard, humble brag. Thank you. I didn't even pay her. Nature functions in wholes, and what that means is that everything in nature is incredibly complex. It's all of these systems internested in other systems. And what that basically means is that us, as little acid-tripping monkeys, don't have a damn clue what we are doing. So we can try and pretend like we have all the answers figured out. We don't. We're managing so much complexity and so many interrelated variables that have cascading effects that we really have to just try and hold on for the ride. So we try to be as proactive and adaptive in our management as we can be. We're constantly reevaluating what we're doing and why. Is it working? How can we tweak the plan so that it can work a little better? And our number of chances at this are pretty limited. I'm 31 years old, so I'm looking at maybe 50 seasons left, right? Not that many chances to learn how to do something. So that's not my goal. I'm just going to try and learn as much as I can while I'm here. The second insight that's the foundation of holistic management is that all environments are different. Good. That's a good one. But the thing that Alan Savory, who's the founder of holistic management, really kind of teased out that's novel is that the thing that makes different environments respond differently to grazing animals isn't the temperature or the amount of precipitation. It's the distribution of precipitation throughout the calendar year. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see this picture was taken in Bellingham, Washington. You guys are probably familiar with that climate, 40 inches of annual precipitation. Right-hand side, Zimbabwe, home of Alan Savory. Anybody want to take a guess what the precip in that picture is? Maybe someone who was in an earlier session with my dad that already got the answer. It's 40 inches. It's exactly the same amount of precipitation, right? So we can see clearly that these are completely different environments. And that has all to do with the fact that in Western Washington, you get precipitation 10 months of the year. The natural trajectory of the ecosystem is to move into forest. The successional state that it wants to be in is in forest. In what we call a brittle environment with highly seasonal rainfall, you get all of this rain in a monsoon event, or we're a more brittle tending. We don't get a monsoon, but we have a definite wet season and a definite dry season. The landscape looks very different. And the role of grazing animals in those two landscapes is also extremely different. So in the non-brittle environment, we can use animals as a tool to halt that succession into forest and keep that land in grassland. In a brittle environment, the rumen of the grazing animal carries all of that moisture and microbial activity that's needed for biological breakdown in its stomach. And if we take those animals away, that mechanism for cycling those nutrients back for new growth is also removed. The third insight is that time is more important than numbers. And what this means is the amount of time that a plant is exposed to grazing pressure has way more to do with whether or not that plant is overgrazed than how many animals it was exposed to. Because overgrazing happens on an individual plant scale. So when a plant is bitten, here's my plant leaf, here's my roots at the bottom. Okay, what happens next? There's like a 3 to 5 day chill out, like, what just happened, man? Then that plant starts to use the energy stored down here in the roots to regrow that plant body. Now, it's the second bite that causes overgrazing. So if that regrowth process hasn't been completed and that plant is grazed again, well, then all of a sudden you start to kill off the energy in the roots. It hasn't had time to replenish that. And what happens over time is those plants are grazed out. And on a landscape, what that means is the most palatable plants are grazed out of existence first, and then you have what we call weeds, which I don't believe in. Weeds are just plants out of place. But we have undesirable or less palatable species remaining. And so we see this species shift all the time, rangeland in the West and all around the world. Oh no, I did the same thing Dad did earlier that I gave him shit for. I want you to see the video though. Okay. So the fourth insight is this predator. Oh, it's going to go real slow now. Oh, now it's going into slow motion. Okay. I forgot I did this. So it's the predator-prey relationship. So if we look at what nature does, because nature has had many, many, many thousands of years to figure all of this out, and we're here in our 60 seasons trying to say that we know better. It's silly. But in nature, you have grasslands, and those grasslands need grazing animals, and the grazing animals need the grasslands. But you know who needs grazing animals? Predators. So all of a sudden these predators come in, the animals are like, well, shoot, better bunch up because I don't want to get eaten by the old lion over there. So they bunch up. Well, now that they're bunched up, they're exhausting all the feed in front of them, so they have to constantly be on the move. Now, over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, this has developed into a symbiotic relationship. And you can see that there's lots of trampling happening here. The cattle are much less selective in terms of what they're choosing to eat because they get this sort of competitive mentality like, oh, well, she's getting that and she's getting that. Well, I better, get what's in front of me. And all of a sudden you can get them to eat things that when they don't have the pressure on, they can just sort of mosey about and they pick out the best things. So we don't use lions on the Lazy R. We use hot wire, and this is me moving cows. So labor intensive to do this rotational grazing stuff. How do I find the time? It's sarcasm. It's not hard, guys. But what is this all... Oh, there's a couple stragglers. I didn't realize the video wasn't over. This all boils down to we're really trying to do what nature would do. And this is... I recently went to a Ranching for Profit course, and they use this term nature plus one, which I really liked. So we look at what would nature do, and then if we could just do one thing, just pick the highest leverage thing that you could do to improve it, what would that management system look like? And if you run the numbers, and we did it in class, really, it's the most profitable way to do it is nature plus one. Not all of this other stuff with steroids and antibiotics and fertilizer and all of these other things we dump money into. So how can we basically farm and ranch the way nature teaches us to, with just a little bit of human ingenuity and control sprinkled on top, like a little salt, not like pouring the MSG on or whatever. All right, so I mentioned quality of life. So I'm not going to talk any more about the grazing stuff. That part's over. But quality of life is really the thing that has been the game changer. So this is from a picture we took this winter, because we went to Hawaii in December with my whole family, including my dad. We left the ranch at the same time. That's the first time that's ever happened. You can applaud. Thank you. But our family has really placed a priority upon making sure that if we're doing this, it better be because it's meeting our quality of life needs. And financial security is a big part of quality of life, but it's not motivated by profit. And the other thing that we really think about is the future resource base. So what do we want our land, our community to look like 100 years in the future? What's the legacy we're trying to build? What are we trying to leave? And if you look at this picture up here, this is this little guy in the top is my dad. And then that's my grandpa and my great-grandpa and my great-great-grandpa Tom on the far left there. So when I put myself in great-great-grandpa Tom's shoes and I think about what kind of legacy I want to leave, what kind of world I want to leave for my kids 4 or 5 generations down the line, that's what drives what we do at the Lazy R. And that's how we're changing the why. All right, on to changing the how. That wasn't enough for me. I did all that by the time I was 25. So, so that leads me into the next little venture. I started this company. I have one of I'll call Dan an honorary co-founder. He was one of our very early farmers that joined the co-op and one of our first board members and the first person that we hired to work for Link. So he's honorary co-founder. But I helped start a company with my business partner, Joel Williamson, called Link Foods, which is a worker, farmer-owned cooperative food hub based in Spokane. And what that essentially means is we have all these member farmers that are small, diversified farms, and they sell at the farmers market. They maybe sell a CSA, but we wanted to find a way to help them reach a bigger level. How do we help grow those farms to an actually financially sustainable level? And that means we had to move local food beyond the farmers market. If you're in Moscow, you guys get away with a little less because you're really lucky down here. But most of the world is not like that. So what do? We take produce from all of those member farms, we aggregate it, and then we do the last mile distribution where we take it to the university dining services, school district, lunch programs, restaurants. We also do a multi-farm CSA program. And here are some of our beautiful member farmers. There's Mr. Dan Jackson on the top left. We source within a 250-mile radius of Spokane, and we deliver in Spokane, down to Pullman, Moscow, out to Coeur d'Alene, and then we go up to Sandpoint. And this business was really built around breaking down the barriers to buying local food. So we went out and interviewed a bunch of producers and buyers and tried to understand why weren't they buying local. We know that we live in an incredibly rich agricultural region where we can grow a lot of food. We have some huge institutions that spend a lot of money purchasing food, and yet at the time we started the business, less than 2% of those dollars were being spent locally. And institutions in Spokane were spending $2 billion per day on food purchases. That's basically anything that's not being bought at a grocery store for domestic consumption. It's a huge amount $2 million per day. I said billion. I wish it was billion. $2 million per day on food purchases. It's a lot. So at that same time we started the business, that was about, I think, that was more than what our farmers markets, all of them in the area combined, were netting in a year. So we were like, well, if we can crack open just a little bit of that business, we sure could bring local food to prime time. So we started to understand the barriers to why these buyers weren't purchasing all this lovely local product. And these were kind of the things that shook out: quantity, time, a lot of dining services, a lot of university dining services and school districts actually contract out their dining services to a third party, so like Sodexo or Aramark. And so those companies are huge, multi-billion international companies that are not really geared to working with people like us. So they have really high insurance requirements for their vendors. And then there's just this incredible amount of complexity when you're working with all of these small farms, and each of them grow 100 different products in small quantities, and they all have totally different life schedules and communication schedules and basic political beliefs, religious beliefs. We have the most diverse group of weird human beings you could ever think of that we have to figure out how to get them all rallied around this one central ethic of feeding our community. So we have made ourselves specialists in understanding the complexity of that system and knowing where we can get product from and from whom. Okay, so where does all that product go? The bulk of our sales go to institutions, so that's primarily university dining services. Gonzaga was an early partner for the business and is still one of our largest customers, although I think Washington State University is going to kick their butt this year. Go Cougars. Sorry, I probably can't say that here either. We also sell to restaurants, a lot of fine dining, the kind of usual suspects. That can be a challenging space to work in. If any of you guys sell direct to restaurants, there's constant churn. You can have things going really good, and then somebody goes back to rehab, and you're back to square one. We also sell retail, so we work a lot with grocery stores. We also do value-added products, so we carry a line of organic juice that's made in Hood River, Oregon. We also carry some sauerkraut and a few other things, and those go to grocery stores. And then we've also found a really nice niche in grocery store delis that seems to be a ever-growing segment for our sales. We also do a multi-farm CSA that I mentioned. It was around 130 boxes last year, and I think we're going for 300 this year. And then the last thing that we do, one other little thing, is we also recognized early on in developing the financials for the business, we knew we needed to have a value-added product that was not seasonal in nature so that we could kind of bolster the fact that ultimately distribution is a terrible business to be in, and produce distribution is about the worst type of distribution you can be in. So we knew it would take a long time for the business to be profitable on a thin margin, highly perishable product. So we were looking for opportunities for value-added, non-seasonal production very early on, and it didn't come right away, but eventually we landed on making craft malt for brewing, baking, and distilling. And so we're just about wrapping, if the snow ever melts, so we can finish cutting a hole in the roof, we will be wrapping up our first expansion of the malt house. So we're doubling our capacity, and we'll be making 8 tons a week of craft malt sourced here on the Great Palouse. Okay, there's one other cool thing about Link Foods, and that is that we are a cooperative. So that means that I'm not the owner. There's no external owner. There are employees that own half the company, and there are farmers that own the other half of the company. They each have to buy in. They pay money into an individual capital account. If they ever leave the co-op, they get that money out, plus whatever share of the profits they've accrued over their time of membership. And we also share the bit. So we share the profits 50-50 between farmers and employees. The ownership is 50-50, and then we have a hybrid board that's composed of workers and farmers, and also 2 community members. And that board operates off of consensus, so there's no majority rules. We all have to get on the same page if we're going to do something. And I'm proud to say, for the most part, that has been really effective and worked super well. Okay, so what have we accomplished in the last 5 years that just flew by, but I aged 20 in them, so... Well, we have paid out over $1.2 million to our member farmers since we launched. Yeah, I'll do the Jeb Bush. Please clap. Last year, we broke $1 million in sales for the co-op, annual sales. We're going to be profitable this year. We're on track to profitability, which means that also all our member farms are going to get a dividend, I hope. We have over 50 farmer owners. We have 8 employees, 5 of whom are worker owners. It takes a year. You have to work for the company for a year before you're eligible for ownership stakes. So we have 3 new hires that are on track. All those employees are paid a living wage with health care, and it's all via democratic ownership. Woohoo! And that is how we changed the how of our food system. So there's only one thing left to do. So, change the who, right? Why not? We're already going down the list. And that's how I landed at my latest project, which is new cowgirl camp. I did not know about farm camp before today, so I got to definitely find some more information. Now, our cowgirl camp is actually for adult women, not kids. And I started Cowgirl Camp with one of my homies from Roots of Resilience, my dear friend and mentor, Sandy Matheson, who's a retired veterinarian, and she has a ranch just north of Bellingham. And this is some of the gals from Cowgirl Camp. Also, I don't know if any of you saw my New York Times article that came out recently. These are the things that did not make the New York Times. So these are from the same photographer, but didn't make the paper. So you guys are like the first people besides me to see them, which is pretty cool. So Cowgirl Camp was started with the idea, how can we change, well, I'll back up a little further. After 20 years of my dad and Sandy and the other folks in this group trying to reach out to conventional cattle producers and convince them to change their production practices, well, there's really not a lot to show for it. I mean, some things have happened, some people have made changes, but for the amount of trainings that have been put on, I think we were all feeling pretty frustrated about how far we had gotten in that time. On the other hand, anytime I talk to someone who doesn't come from a conventional cattle background about the principles of holistic management, they just go, that all seems very sensible. It's stuff that you should do. So I'm like, why am I trying to convince these people that are like, la, 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 to do something when these other people over here are like, let's go. So that's sort of where Cowgirl Camp was born. And from that, of course, Sandy and I, both being women ranchers, we really wanted to create a space for new people that wanted to come into animal agriculture with a new paradigm and a new approach. We wanted to give them the tools to be successful because we didn't want them to just go buy a bunch of goats off of Craigslist and stick them in their backyard and then... So, not Nicole. Someone else. It's okay, you can come this summer. Okay. Anyway, we really wanted to give people the tools for success. So what do you learn at Cowgirl Camp? Well, the first day we say, hello, everybody, nice to meet you. What's your name? We're going to go butcher a cow. So we bring them out to we slaughter on farm, and they get an anatomy lesson, and they get to watch our butchers go to work. And we have people that kind of come from all across the spectrum to this camp, anywhere from the very, very new to people that have kind of had their own farm for a few years, but they're looking for some more technical skills. And there's definitely some people that get a little greedy around the gills, but we haven't lost anybody yet. We also teach them animal husbandry, so it's co-taught by my friend who's a veterinarian, as I mentioned. So she has all kinds of delightful things, like you can do IM and sub-Q injections on an orange. She makes these little testicles she puts balloons and puts sand in them, and then takes a little shower loofah and makes a little scrotum, and everybody gets their own little nutsack to practice castration, which is a skill every woman should know. We cover ecological monitoring, so we get out on the field, we teach them to look at the ground and really read the ground through these 4 ecosystem processes, observing the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, the energy flow through the system, and also the community dynamics and biodiversity. They also get some hands-on practice at low-stress livestock handling. So here's some of the gals helping me move my sheep in the morning, and my dog not being helpful, but very supportive. And of course, planned grazing, which is what people get really excited about. That's the sexy part of holistic management. This is our token man at Cowgirl Camp. He only gets to come out for a couple hours at the very end of the week. Even my husband hides, which is for the best. Probably because of all the castration happening. But my dad does help us with our fencing and facilities, and then we also really look at holistic decision making. So taking this framework of what do you want your quality of life to look like, what do you want your future resource to be, your resource base to look like, and how can we be proactively managing to make sure that every step we make is pushing us in that direction instead of just sort of reacting at things as they're like flying past our heads. How can we really keep that clear vision and give people the tools to move forward and create the futures that they want to have? And it has been probably, I've done a lot. I'm only 31, and I've done a lot of things that I've been proud of in my life, including having a really awesome kid. But this is one of the very best things I've done in my life. And it is so gratifying to take a group of women and go through this really intense 5 days, because it is boot camp. We are sun up to sundown ranching. And there's a lot of classroom work too. It's not like hard physical labor, so don't let that scare you away. But to have all those people at the end of the week say that they feel like their life is completely changed, that they feel like free and ready to do the things they want to do, is so gratifying. And that is why everyone should come to Cowgirl Camp. We do one that men can come to also. That's called New Rancher Camp. They complained a lot about being excluded. All right, so I want to kind of close this out on, this is something that my dad spoke to earlier, and this is a quote from Sandy, who's my new Cowgirl Camp co-founder. And she says, if you have a healthy plant community, if you have young plants in there. If you only have mature plants, you do have a dying community. And so farming, if you really look at it in that sense, is a dying profession. And that is real. So that reason up there is exactly why I am passionate about changing the who of agriculture. Because if we look at nature as our teacher, the basic lesson of ecology is that diversity is a key indicator of stability in a system. And if we look at our land managers as a group, it's not diverse. They all look the same. We're not bringing the best minds to solving some really big problems that we have to fix in the next 20 to 30 years. So that means that we need to be doing all that we can to make sure that we're breaking down barriers, improving access so that all of these young people that are hungry to create meaning and change on our landscape are empowered to do it. So, changing the how, changing the why, changing the who. That's my contact information. That's all I got. I'm done now. Thank you.